Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are dusting off a name that usually sits in the back of everyone's mind, filed away next to, geometry proofs in the periodic table. Hammurabi.
Indeed. The man, the myth, the giant black rock.
Exactly. And for most of us, that file contains exactly one piece of information, an eye for an eye.
Right.
You picture this harsh ancient judge handing out biblical-style punishments, and that's about it.
But looking at the stack of research you've pulled together, that caricature feels really incomplete.
Oh, it's not just incomplete, it actually misses the point of his entire career.
Mm-hmm.
While the legal code is the headline, and we will definitely get into the gritty details of that later, it's really just the capstone of a much, much bigger project.
That's what struck me. We aren't just looking at a judge. We're looking at the prototype for the emperor. This is a guy who took a tiny, dusty city-state Babylon and basically ran a 40-year masterclass in geopolitics and logistics to become the master of Mesopotamia. The mission for this deep dive is to figure out how he did that. We're going to look at the strategy behind his conquests, the invention of what we might call the first true imperial bureaucracy, and then re-examine that famous code.
Okay.
Because as the sources suggest, those laws weren't really about morality. They were about economics, class control, and just holding a massive, diverse empire together.
So let's drop the listener right into the map. We're in the year 1792 BCE. What does Hammurabi's world even look like?
Chaos. Absolute chaos. Historians call it a mosaic of competing city-states, but, that's a polite way of saying it was a Shark Tank.
A Shark Tank.
Yeah. You have to imagine Mesopotamia not as a single country, but as this collection of rival kingdoms all crowded around the Tigris and Euphrates rivers.
And these aren't small skirmishes.
No. These are constant, grinding wars over irrigation networks, over trade routes. You've got powerful players like Larsa in the south, Eshnunna, the Elamites encroaching from the east, and then you've got Babylon.
And Babylon isn't the shark in this scenario, is it?
Oh, far from it. When Hammurabi inherits the throne in 1792, Babylon is a total underdog. We are talking about a kingdom that controls roughly 50 square miles.
50. That's smaller than Washington, D.C.
It was tiny. And he is surrounded by giants. To the south, the king of Larsa controls the ports. To the east, the Elamites are wealthy and aggressive.
Mm-hmm.
If you were placing bets in 1792 BCE, nobody is putting their money on the young kid in Babylon.
Which sets up the first major surprise, really, from the sources, which is his timeline. You'd expect a young king in a dangerous neighborhood to, come out swinging.
Yeah, to prove he's tough.
But he does the opposite.
Exactly. This is what we call the long game. For the first 30 years of his 42-year reign, the map barely changes.
30 years. That's a lifetime of the Bronze Age. Most kings didn't even rule that long. So if he isn't conquering, what on earth is he doing?
He's making himself indispensable. He realized he couldn't win a direct war, not yet. So he opted for diplomatic survival. He positioned Babylon as the junior partner to the bigger powers.
Who is helping them out?
Yes. He formed alliances, sent troops to help other kings fight their wars, and just generally tried to look like a helpful, non-threatening neighbor.
While quietly sharpening the knife.
And building the economy. The records from this period are just full of infrastructure projects. He's repairing city walls, but more importantly, he is dredging canals. In Mesopotamia, canals are life.
Water is power.
If you control the irrigation, you control the surplus grain. He spent 3 decades building up a massive war chest and letting his rivals exhaust themselves fighting each other.
It's a classic Cold War strategy. Let the superpowers bleed each other dry, then you step in.
And that pivot point finally comes in 1764 BCE.
The gloves come off.
Completely. A massive coalition forms against him. The Elamites, Eshnunna, Larsa. It was an existential crisis. But by this point, Hammurabi had the resources, he had the alliances to strike back. He teamed up with a king named Zimri-Lim of Mari, and together they just crushed the coalition.
And once that domino fell, he didn't stop.
No. The junior partner mask dropped completely. He went on a rampage. And this is where we see his tactical genius. We tend to think of ancient warfare as just, guys with spears smashing into each other. But Hammurabi weaponized the environment itself.
You're talking about the campaign against Larsa.
Yes. Larsa was his main rival in the south. The city was heavily fortified. A siege would have taken years. So Hammurabi engaged in what we call hydraulic warfare. He dammed the Euphrates River upstream.
That is just brutal efficiency.
It is total war. He could literally turn off their water supply to thirst them out, or and he did this too, released the dam suddenly to flood their defenses.
He didn't just fight their army, he fought their geography.
He cut off their drinking water and their trade route in one move.
And he did something similar with the Assyrians too, didn't he?
Yeah.
But with timing, not water.
Exactly. In Mesopotamia, there's a distinct campaign season. You fight after the harvest, when the ground is dry. Hammurabi attacked Assyria in the winter.
During the rainy season.
It was unheard of. The Assyrian troops were likely dispersed, in winter quarters. Nobody expects an army to march through mud. He caught them completely off guard. It shows a level of tactical flexibility that most commanders just didn't have.
But we can't talk about his military success without talking about the moral cost, specifically the betrayal of Mari. This stood out to me as the red wedding moment of the story.
It really is. Remember King Zimri-Lim?
The ally from the north, the guy who helped him save Babylon back in 64.
That's him. They were close. I mean, we have letters between them. They shared intelligence, troops, diplomatic gifts. Zimri-Lim probably thought they were partners in this new world order. But in 1761, Hammurabi decided he didn't want a partner. He wanted the whole map.
So he just turns on him.
He marched his army north, captured Mari, and razed it to the ground.
Just like that.
Just like that. But here's the great irony of history. When Hammurabi burned the palace at Mari, the roof collapsed. And buried underneath that rubble was the royal archive. Thousands of clay tablets.
And because they were clay.
The fire didn't destroy them. It baked them. It turned them into ceramic. So Hammurabi's act of destruction accidentally preserved the most detailed record of diplomacy and espionage we have from the ancient world. It's because he burned the city that we know exactly how he deceived its king.
Wow. So by 1755 BCE, the dust settles. The guy who started with 50 square miles now controls everything from the Persian Gulf to the Zagros Mountains. Right. He's the master of 50,000 square miles.
And that brings us to the second phase of our deep dive, what you could call the problem of empire.
Right. Because conquering is one skill set. Ruling is completely different. How do you manage a territory that big when your fastest communication technology is, a runner with a rock?
You invent bureaucracy. This is arguably Hammurabi's more lasting contribution than his wars. He realized the old system where you conquer a city, leave the local king in charge, and just demand tribute was too unstable.
Local kings rebel.
They always rebel, so he centralized it. Aggressively. He replaced local rulers with appointed governors called shakanaku. These weren't royals. They were career civil servants. They could be hired, and more importantly, they could be fired.
But how does he keep them honest? If I'm a governor 3 weeks march from Babylon, why shouldn't I just skim off the tax revenue?
Because Hammurabi is watching. He created a network of royal inspectors, literally called the Eyes of the King. These guys reported directly to the palace, bypassing the governors.
It's an internal affairs division.
It's a surveillance state. And it relied on a massive flow of data. The sources describe a constant stream of daily dispatches. Messengers were running cuneiform tablets back and forth between Babylon and the provinces every single day.
I was reading some of the translations of these letters. The guy was an absolute micromanager.
Oh, completely. We have letters where the king of the world is writing to a governor telling him exactly how many sheep to shear or scolding him because a specific shipment of sesame oil was 2 days late. He was obsessed with the details.
But it wasn't just nagging. He used this centralization to create a unified economy, right?
Yes, this is crucial. Before this, every city-state had its own weights and measures. A shekel of silver in Mari might weigh differently than a shekel in Larsa.
It kills trade.
Kills it dead.
Yeah.
Nobody trusts the transaction. Hammurabi standardized it all.
He created a single standard for weights and measures across the entire empire,
which allowed trade to explode. We see evidence of lapis lazuli from Afghanistan and copper from Oman flowing freely into Babylonian markets because merchants knew the rules were the same everywhere. He essentially created a Bronze Age common market.
So he's a conqueror, he's a CEO, but now we have to get to the main event, the thing he is actually famous for, the code.
The Code of Hammurabi.
First off, let's clear up the physical misconception. I think people picture a book or a scroll, but this wasn't something you held in your hand.
No, not at all. It was a monument, a stele. It's a pillar of black basalt, over 7 feet tall. It looks like a giant black finger pointing at the sky.
And it was public, right?
Theoretically, yes. It was placed in a temple courtyard. Now, most people couldn't read, so there's a performative aspect to it. It's a symbol saying, the law is here, it is permanent, and it is watching you.
Okay, let's dig into the content. We mentioned eye for an eye earlier. the principle of lex talionis. But the sources highlight that we usually get this totally wrong.
We do. We think it means equality. Everyone gets treated the same. But it definitely does not mean that. If you read the text, specifically laws 196 through 205, you see that lex talionis only applies between equals.
And this is the part that really reveals the structure of their society. The code isn't just a list of crimes. It's a diagram of their class system.
Exactly. The code explicitly divides people into 3 tiers. At the top, you have the awilu, the freemen, the landowners, the elite.
Okay.
In the middle, the mushkinu commoners, maybe dependents of the palace. And at the bottom, the wardu, the slaves.
So walk us through a concrete example. If I poke someone's eye out, the punishment depends entirely on who I am and who they are.
Correct. If you are an awilu noble and you blind another noble, then yes, your eye is blinded. That's the famous eye for an eye.
But if I'm a noble and I blind a commoner, a mushkinu,
You pay a fine, specifically 1 mina of silver.
I keep my eye.
You keep your eye. And if you blind a slave, you pay half the slave's market value to the owner. Because in the eyes of the law, you haven't hurt a person, you've damaged property.
That is a stark reality check. It's price fixing for violence based on social status.
It is. The code wasn't designed to create a utopia of equality. It was designed to keep the peace and protect the assets of the upper class.
But looking beyond the violence, what fascinated me was the economic regulation. The code covers things that feel so modern, like professional liability. It's regulating the gig economy of 1750 BCE.
It does. And the stakes for professional negligence were incredibly high. Take surgeons. Law 218 states that if a surgeon performs a major operation on a free man with a bronze lancet and the patient dies,
What
the
happens?
surgeon's hand is cut off.
That is severe. But I guess it solves the malpractice insurance problem.
It certainly incentivizes careful work. Same for builders. If a builder constructs a house and it collapses and kills the owner, the builder is put to death. If it kills the owner's son, the builder's son is put to death.
That last part is just chilling, vicarious punishment. But I want to pivot to something that seemed almost progressive, and that is the debt laws.
This is one of the most interesting parts, I think. Hammurabi understood that debt was a cancer that could eat his empire from the inside out.
Because if everyone's in debt, the economy just stalls out.
Worse, if everyone becomes a debt slave, there's no one left to farm the land or fight in the army. So he set strict price controls. He capped interest on grain loans at 33% and silver loans at 20%.
I mean, 33% is still pretty high.
It is, but in a world with no regulation, lenders were charging 50%, 100%. He stopped the spiral, and more importantly, he put a term limit on debt slavery.
A term limit.
Yeah. If you went bankrupt and had to sell yourself or your family into servitude to pay off a loan, the code mandated that you could only be held for 3 years. In the 4th year, you had to be released.
A bankruptcy protection clause.
Essentially, it wasn't about being nice. It was about maintaining a viable population of tax-paying, sword-carrying subjects.
Now, we can't talk about the social fabric without talking about women. The code has a lot to say about family law.
It's a real mixed bag. Women in Babylon actually had more legal agency than in many later civilizations, like, say, classical Greece. They could own property, run businesses, testify in court. But the sexual double standards were, well, they were codified in stone.
The adultery laws being the clearest example.
Oh, yes. If a wife was caught in adultery, she and her lover were tied together and thrown into the river, drowning.
And if a husband committed adultery.
The code is silent. Generally, men could have affairs, visit prostitutes, or take secondary wives with very little legal consequence. The law was hyper-focused on ensuring that the children, the heirs to property, belonged to the husband.
It's all about the patriarchal line of inheritance.
It always is.
So we have this massive legal system, this complex bureaucracy. But how did he sell it? I mean, he's just one guy. Why did everyone listen to him?
That brings us to the theological shift. Hammurabi knew that military might wasn't enough to hold diverse people together. He needed a story. So he promoted his city's god, Marduk.
And Marduk wasn't always a big deal, right?
No, before Hammurabi, Marduk was a pretty local deity, a minor player. Hammurabi embarked on this massive propaganda campaign to elevate Marduk to the king of the gods.
Which conveniently mirrors Hammurabi becoming king of kings.
Exactly. The narrative was, the great gods have handed power to Marduk, and Marduk has chosen me, Hammurabi, to establish justice. You see this right in the prologue of the code. He has himself depicted receiving the laws directly from the sun god, Shamash.
It's a brilliant move. If the laws come from the gods, then disobeying the king isn't just a crime, it's a sin. It makes the law unchallengeable.
But, and here's the tragedy of the great man theory. Despite the God-given laws and the efficient bureaucracy, the empire just didn't last.
It fell apart pretty quickly after he died, didn't it?
Almost instantly. Hammurabi died around 1750 BCE. His son, Samsu-Iluna, took over, and the whole thing just unraveled. The south revolted, the north rebelled. The system was too centralized. It relied too heavily on Hammurabi's personal energy.
His ability to micromanage those daily dispatches.
Yes. Without the genius at the center, the machine stopped working. Within a century and a half, the Hittites came down from the mountains, sacked Babylon, and that was the end of the dynasty.
So if the empire collapsed that fast, why does his name survive? Why are we even doing a deep dive on him 4,000 years later?
Because while the borders fell, the ideas won. Hammurabi changed the operating system of civilization.
In what way?
He established the concept that the law should be written down and public. Before this, justice was often arbitrary, whatever the local warlord felt like doing that day. Hammurabi put it in stone. He established the idea that there is a standard that exists outside of the ruler's head.
A rule of law.
Even if that law was harsh, it was consistent. And his administrative systems, the governors, the tax structure, the reporting, those were copied by everyone who came after. The Assyrians, the Persians, eventually the Romans, they all used the template Hammurabi built.
So he was the bridge. He took the chaotic city-states of the early Bronze Age and proved you could weld them into a superstate.
That is the legacy. He proved that diverse people, speaking different languages, worshiping different gods, could be ruled under one system.
Well, that brings us to the end of this deep dive. We've gone from the water wars of the Euphrates to the invention of the surveillance state.
It has been quite a journey.
I want to leave everyone with a final thought to chew on. In the prologue to the code, Hammurabi says these laws were given to him to protect the weak from the strong. That's the stated mission.
A noble sentiment.
Right. But when you look at the actual text, where a rich man pays a small fine for blinding a commoner, but a commoner loses an eye for blinding a rich man, you have to ask, was this really about justice? Or was the very first legal code in human history actually just a sophisticated tool to protect the property of the 1%?
It raises the eternal question, doesn't it? Is law inherently a tool of moral justice, or is it just a mechanism to maintain the order of the ruling class?
Now, looking around the world 4,000 years later, I'm not sure we have fully answered that question yet. Something to think about. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.